Hi everybody, I'm Amy Stewart. I'm a writer and an artist, and I'm taking your questions. So you can post a question below in the comments and maybe I'll answer it in a future video. And I've gotten a bunch from people. I actually got a whole bunch of questions that all had to do with the same thing, which is how do you conduct historical research? So let me say a little bit about that. I actually teach a whole class on this, and I will put a link to that if you want to see more. But my big thing with historical research is to go back to that time period and read things that were written then, rather than take the word of a historian writing today who's looking back. I really want the sense of immediacy, and I want the sense of what people thought about their world at the time as compared to what we think about it now, maybe looking back 100 years or more. So one of the best things for that is old newspapers. Definitely, if by historical you mean something that's less than 200 years ago, there will be newspapers. And some of those newspapers have been digitized, some of them have not. So I use a lot of online sources to search newspapers that have been digitized, but I've also spent a lot of time in library basements going through microfilm. It's time consuming, but sometimes that's the only way. In addition to newspapers and also magazines, one thing is that Google for years did this book scanning project, and one of the things they scanned were anthologies of magazines from maybe 100, 150 years ago. So old issues of Popular Mechanics from the 1910s. That stuff is really helpful. I also look around on eBay and look around at used book sites to try to find other just historical artifacts that would help me. Like I have a 100-year-old Sears and Roebuck catalog, so I can look and see what my characters would have bought, what they would have owned. I recently bought a city directory from Paterson, New Jersey from the 1920s. This thing's a doorstop. It's sort of a telephone book before anyone was putting telephone numbers in them, before people even had telephones, really. But that kind of stuff is very useful. And another thing that's really helpful is to go visit the place. Visit the local historical society, where they're going to have all kinds of other artifacts and documents that have not been digitized, that you cannot find online, but that can take you back to what people were thinking and feeling at that time. And one more thing, I also really like to read novels written in the time period that I'm writing about. So I actually have a whole bookshelf right here of old books from 100 years ago that were written in the voice of the time, and it just really, you can interestingly get kind of a sense of everyday life in a novel in a way that isn't going to be in the newspaper. So I'll give you an example. In one of these books, there was a scene where a woman had a curling iron, and I thought, curling irons, what did curling irons look like in the 1910s? And it turns out that they did have curling irons, and they were gas powered, and they could catch on fire, and they did catch on fire. And I thought, oh, that is fantastic. I'm totally using that. Well, there was nothing about that in any newspaper that I found, but I found out about it by reading a novel where a woman was using a curling iron. So those little hints of everyday life can come from there as well. And finally, I'll just say that universities have archives. Whether you're writing about a famous person or a not so famous person, there may well be a university that has an archive of papers, and you can read actual letters and diaries and other documents from the time period that can tell you a lot about ordinary people and also about famous people. Okay, so there's a lot more that I could say about historical research because I do so much of it, but like I say, I have got a whole class on it, so I'll just leave it at that, but you can check I'll put the link down below if you want to find out more about it. And if you have any more questions, post them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. Thanks.